Welcome back to Airman Vision. This channel is dedicated to helping you prepare for the Air Force, succeeding while you're in, and then excelling once you get out. Today, we're interviewing Frank Bachard. He's going to share his journey on how he went from security forces in the Air Force to a successful career in sales. If you want any further information from Airman Vision, be sure to check out the YouTube channel, subscribe, and check out our website, airmanvision.com. All of our social media platforms are also linked right above. So what was your resume before you joined the Air Force, and what age did you end up joining the Air Force at?
So before I joined the Air Force, I was in high school. I joined when I was 19, so it was just after I graduated. So that was in 2009 was when I graduated high school. And then that January of 2010 is when I actually left for basic training. In junior year of high school, I started talking to the recruiter. I had my parents sign off saying that I can actually go in and actually train with the recruiter because I was actually overweight, lost weight actually before I even fully joined, and to go into the DEP and to go into to MEPS.
So you hadn't worked any full-time job before joining the Air Force then?
I worked part-time at a bowling alley, so I wasn't really a full-time employee anywhere. So I was just going to school and working at a bowling alley when I could. That was local.
That's good and relatable because not everybody that joins the Air Force, had a full-time job before joining. And so you went into never working a full-time job to here you're starting a career
Correct.
in the Air Force.
It's pretty wild going from being in high school, not really knowing much, to being opened up to endless possibilities.
So you joined right after high school. So what was your resume while you were in the Air Force?
So I was in security forces. So I signed for 4 years. While I was in, I really didn't do anything besides my normal job.
So you just did the typical, check the IDs at the gate. Was there any other aspects of your job that you did while you were in?
I was at Barksdale Air Force Base, so we were a nuclear facility ready base. So we had B-52s that would actually go to our facility before they would actually go overseas or wherever it needs to go. So they would actually get loaded at Minot Air Force Base, and then they would actually come to us for final inspection, and then they would actually go out. So we had to control the security level throughout the planes, as well as doing normal patrol and then checking IDs as well. So it was like a 3-part job. I had to basically be at one of those 3 bases, whether it be Aviano, Minot, or Barksdale, but I stayed at Barksdale the entire time.
So a lot of flight line patrol because you guys had a
Yes.
nuclear facility with the B-52s. Since leaving the Air Force, what has been your resume? Did you stick with, being a cop and doing security forces, or did you transition into something completely different once you got out?
I went completely different than being a cop or being any part of security at all. When I first initially got out, I tried to do security because I didn't know what else to do. I was actually talking to a good friend of mine through the bowling community, and he asked me if I wanted to become in sales. And at the time, it was at a tire company. Pursued that. I was there for 5 years. I actually enjoyed selling. And then I met my wife online. I moved to Long Island shortly after, about 2-3 years after meeting her. And that's where I am now. And now I'm selling vehicles. So instead of selling just the tires, I'm selling the entire product now.
And you've stuck with that ever since you got out. And you got out how many years ago?
Yeah, so I got out in 2014. Been doing this for 10 years now.
So you went from not having a full-time job to being essentially a cop for 4 years right out the gate. And then as soon as you were done being a cop, you tried to transition a little bit to security. Didn't end up working out, wasn't really your passion, got into sales. And so you've done sales for over 9 years, almost a decade now.
Yes, I would say sales is now my niche as far as communicating with people, seeing what things that they need. So in retrospect, I think having the security forces background and being in the military actually helped me be more, I would say, open with people in public, because you had that interaction with people daily when you were actually checking IDs at the gates, pulling people over, what have you. Had to talk to people greatly helped me and opened me up a little bit. In high school, I was quite shy and not open.
So is there anything else that you took away from your time in the Air Force that maybe is a surprise to you, where 2 different jobs that you did, but still your experience in the Air Force translated to now your civilian career in sales? What are those things that have really translated that maybe surprise you or that other people wouldn't realize at first?
I would say being very professional at what I do, showing up on time, doing the right things. It just made it like more of a concrete background coming from military, coming from the Air Force, because you had to. It wasn't like now where nobody's really pressing me to do the things that I do daily, but I have to do them to survive. Before, when I was in the military, they were doing it to you. Now it's more or less on myself, but which does help me because I always think in the back of my mind that this is what you should be doing. That's what really helps me out as far as like moving on and talking to the next customer, picking up the next phone call. That's all part of sales as far as like making sure you're moving forward as well, but doing it the right way.
So it's kind of that mindset of you may not enjoy every aspect of it, but it's still what you're getting paid to do. So you have to show up
Correct.
and do it. Even though in the military, right, you said it's way more strict. They're not
Yes.
just going to turn around and fire you if you show up late twice. Like they're going to make your life harder. They're going to give you more work. You're going to get in trouble and you have to stay in and keep fulfilling your contract versus a civilian career. You don't have that kind of pressure anymore, but now it's more of a choice rather than you're being forced to. But I'm sure that definitely helps you stand out among your peers. You are very concise about things and you're on point versus you have some other people that don't have that structure that they haven't experienced in their life. And so for you, it's second nature at this point, and you have other people that are still playing catch up. That definitely is something that has massively helped you stand out. And the professionalism thing too is people probably know that either one, you're incredible at sales, you've been in sales for a long time, so that's why you're so professional, or you had prior experience with something else. I'm sure there's other people, maybe you've probably been asked if you were in the military previously because of the way you act or things that you do.
Yep, all the time.
Do you get asked that by customers if you were prior military?
Typically, people ask, "Oh, what branch were you in?" I'm like, "How can you tell?" And they're like, "Oh, your professionalism. I can greatly tell." The way that I greet people, because I still say sir, ma'am.
When you had to check IDs at the gate, you would say that hundreds of times in a day.
Thousands
Yeah.
times.
So I'm sure it's like baked in now. It's literally second nature. You'll probably have said that more times in your 4 years in the Air Force than most people will say in their entire life.
I would say that's a fair statement. Yeah.
And it might seem not fun in the moment when you're in the Air Force, but then when you come back into the civilian world, you're much more polished. Some of those things where you probably didn't realize, checking IDs at the gate every day, while you were doing that, you're not thinking, wow, this is actually really going to help my future career. Probably the last thing that was on your mind when you were standing there checking IDs. Yes. But it's cool that, 10 plus years later, you're able to look back and go, actually, checking IDs and doing that all day makes me really good at my job now because I have to interact with people. And I've done that so much that I'm essentially an expert at it compared to your peers.
There's a lot of people in this industry that don't last long because they're afraid to say hi, or they don't know how to say hi, or introduce themselves, or even be professional. There's a lot of people that have a lot of attitude that is negative or is too positive, end up not lasting because they don't know how to communicate with people. So I greatly thank the Air Force, and especially the training that I had of basically being professional all the time, no matter what. So integrity first, making sure you're actually doing the right thing no matter what.
That's one of the things that stuck with me too, is like the integrity first thing. I've always been like a person that really prioritized integrity, but joining the Air Force like really hammered that into my head even more. And so it's been, one of those things where it might seem cliche because, it's one of the core values of the Air Force. If you truly embrace those core values, like as a civilian, you're going to stand out. There's a lot of people in your peers that you work with today that don't prioritize those things. And so it definitely sets you above them.
There's another thing that I catch myself doing, especially like when I'm in an interview or when I'm trying to focus, is I'm always paying attention to my surroundings as well. I'm not even looking directly at the camera. I'm hearing you. I'm looking, but I'm also scanning as well because I'm currently at work. But even if I'm not, I'm still looking around to knowing what's going on. Before joining the military, it wasn't like that at all.
Before joining, you were essentially clueless.
Yeah,
of,
I was just
your
like
surroundings.
Blinded.
What was your best experience in the Air Force?
I would definitely say the brotherhood. We got very close with one another, of us, especially security forces. It's a very tight unit. Usually security forces doesn't hang out with anybody outside of security forces because they don't get what we do. And they consider us as narcs, which we're just doing our job of basically making sure that everybody stays safe and everybody does what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, you're not a narc if everybody does what they're paid to do.
Exactly. So that was the disconnect that still continues on to today. Even for civilian life, if somebody's a police officer, it's the same thing. What I've noticed is they don't hang out with everybody outside of being a police officer. It's more of a close knit group. So all the people that I have trained with or was at Barksdale Air Force Base with, I try to stay in contact with as many people as I can, because that was a special bond that you can't really break. It's something that stay with me the rest of my life, and I'm sure I will stay with them as well.
When I was in Japan, the security forces dorms were right across the parking lot from the maintenance dorms, and we were both like the black sheep of the Air Force base.
Yeah.
And so there's actually a lot of the maintainers would hang out with security forces. Between maintenance and security forces, we both worked really long hours. The work environment was more tough and gruff. There wasn't a lot of crossover, even like you said, like they usually keep to themselves, and like maintenance kept to themselves, security forces kept to themselves. There was a little bit of crossover, but not much. All right, so to flip this around, what was your worst experience when you were in the Air Force?
So the worst experience was also the amount of structure that there actually was. So basically, like, there's obviously limitations of what you can and can't do.
It's like excessive corporate red tape.
Yeah. So I'm a big family guy. And obviously, when I was stationed in Barksdale Air Force Base, I'm originally from Connecticut, so it's a big jump. You can't just go to your home on the weekend. Whenever I wanted to plan leave, I was always surrounded by the holidays, and somebody's always had leave before me, because obviously I was only a senior airman at the time. So
Yeah.
those dates were blocked out. I would have to plan around that. So I would never spend like the holidays with my parents or my cousins or my sister or anybody. So that was the biggest thing that I saw was an issue of being far away from family, without being able to see them when I wanted to.
Yeah, it's definitely not like most civilian jobs where, if they're like, we're going to be closed for the week, and they don't care if every single employee flies across the country to go back and visit home.
Correct.
In the military, they're like, no, we still need to maintain our operations
Exactly.
every day.
Even if you're off, we still
Yeah.
need you to be around.
Like Christmas, New Year, like there still needs to be somebody checking IDs at the gate. And then you guys have dispatch. Like there's people that got to be on. And same thing for maintenance is we always had to have crews ready in case they needed to launch anything and have things ready, so that we always had a skeleton crew even on those holiday time periods. It's one of those things where in a civilian job, when they're like, yeah, we're closed for the day, they can like close and nobody even has to be in the building. Just lock the building and everybody goes away. And
You don't have to be in the same country and can just
yep.
be wherever you want.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the harder things I think a lot of people have to get used to. Is some of the other career paths in the Air Force might have a little more leniency when it comes to that. But definitely, I know security forces, maintenance were among those that they maintain 24-hour operations year round. Now, imagine if you would have done, 20 years.
It's wild to think of that I would be spending that much time away from family on the most precious holidays.
So, topping off the best experience, worst experience, did you ever have a moment where there was like a teaching lesson where, one of your supervisors or senior leaders told you something and it just really stuck to you? Or a moment where you maybe got in trouble and it like finally clicked for you that you were like, oh, I see the importance in this now?
There was an instance that I actually did get in trouble, and he pointed out to me of why it was important. Going to that moment was basically like, well, that can't happen again. People die if that continues on. So more or less of basically like forgetting to do something, you can't do that in the Air Force, no matter what job. That is probably what instills in my brain of you have to follow everything through great detail and don't leave anything out. I would say that would be the single most important thing that I've learned, is to make sure that you follow everything to the T. Even if you don't like it or if you forget about it, you make sure that you have to do it and tell somebody.
This isn't my biggest learning lesson, but it's very similar to what you had. Is when I was at basic training and we had Beast Week, I had two of my ABU uniforms that were at dry cleaning, and
Oh,
I
no.
didn't go. And so we have 4 sets that were issued at basic training.
Yeah.
2 of them were in dry cleaning. I had forgotten that dry cleaning closed at noon on Sundays, and it was like 1:30, And I was like, oh, shoot, I need to go get dry cleaning. They were already closed. And we were leaving Monday morning for Beast. It was a requirement that we had all 4 of our ABUs to go to Beast Week. I went and told my MTI. I wanted to take a moment to interrupt this interview and remind you to like this video if you're enjoying this interview so far, and also share it with anybody who you might find it relevant for. And I know interrupting videos to share affiliate links gets really annoying, but that is one of the ways that you can help support this channel so we can keep going and making content for you guys. I like to stay really busy, so I don't really have time to dabble in individual investments, and that's why I use Acorns, because it does all of the investing for you. Since getting out of the Air Force 6 years ago, I've slowly invested into my Acorns account anywhere from $20 to $100 a month. The best part about this is that I've been able to set it and forget it, and over the last 5, they've gotten me over $4,000 in return. That's $4,000 that I didn't have to do a single thing for other than just put a few dollars per month into my account. Thankfully, Acorns does a referral bonus. So if you sign up using my referral link, then you'll get $5 deposited into your account as a bonus for just making your first deposit. Now let's get back to the interview. I went and told my MTI. He flipped out. This is actually the only thing. I had done everything else perfect at basic training, and this one time, and I went and told on myself because I didn't want him to find out and me trying to cover it up. He actually gave me a U for the week of training, which prevented me from getting honor graduate. My one mistake at all of basic training, but he made me write a paper why it is so important to fully be prepared when packing for a mission and packing for deployment. Didn't seem like that big of a deal where I was like, oh my gosh, you're going to prevent me from getting honor graduate here. But for him, people get somewhere on a deployment, and if somebody forgot to pack the right stuff, that completely hinders the entire unit's ability to operate and can actually put people's lives at risk. Bigger picture learning moment for me there. But a lot of times we don't think that our actions have a bigger consequence at the end of the day. Essentially, he was like, nobody's going to die on Beast Week. Like you're fine. However, if you don't prioritize this now and get this to be muscle memory for you, if you go on a deployment and you don't prioritize it this way, that could happen to you. That stuck with me this whole time.
Very similar situation for what happened to me is I forget to check one gate and it happened to be unlocked. Somebody found out about it later on the next shift. I got written up for it, and my supervisor was called in. Basically, he's saying that if this happens, then somebody can get in. It's unsecured. You're putting everybody at risk, not just yourself, but everybody that goes near that facility. He's saying people can die because of what you did.
And working at a nuclear facility, like you're putting essentially the whole area at risk.
Thank God that wasn't a part of the mission or anything like that. It wasn't
the gate that you left unlocked wasn't to a nuclear facility, but
it wasn't to a nuclear facility. It wasn't to any major assets, but it was still unlocked, and I still did mess up.
It was the concept of that of what if this was for one of those bigger,
if it was
bigger
a nuclear
things
facility and you just left it unlocked, you just killed millions of people.
And then you're like, whoa, wait a second.
Yeah.
Me taking an extra 2 minutes of my day to do my job correctly can save that many people.
Yeah. Yes, it can.
Or keep that many people alive instead of, destroy the entire area. And it's one of those things where it's easy to think that our little decisions each day don't have massive consequences. However, that's not true. Some small decisions don't have big consequences. Thankfully, that gate that you did leave unlocked wasn't, 2 major assets. However, if you easily forget to lock a gate with that, what's going to stop you from forgetting when you are put in a position where you need to lock gates that do lead to major assets? If it just slips your mind and you don't think twice about it, when you get put in a situation where you need to perform and there is no room for error, they want you to have that be muscle memory to that point where it doesn't matter. Like you don't even think twice about it. You're going to make sure that everything is secure. Now that you've been out for 10 years, what would be your advice for somebody that's initially looking to join right now?
So I would do a lot of research on their current job of what they actually want to pursue. The reason for that is because for the Air Force, you're designed to do your job. It's not like other branches where you can not do your job. The Air Force is actually, if you're assigned to security forces, you're going to be doing security forces. You're not going to be loading bombs or what have you. You're going to be doing security forces. So know about your job, know the people that have done your job before, and research that, because everybody's going to have a different experience as well just try to get as much knowledge as you possibly can on the job. Obviously, you can't pick what base you go to, but it's also nice of when you're making your dream sheet of, okay, these are the bases I want to try to avoid if I can, and not put them on my wish list or dream sheet, to make sure that you know the job that you're doing and of possibly where it would actually be. Because I know there's certain jobs where they don't go to certain bases as well.
And actually on this channel, I have a few videos that we have posted about, the top 5 jobs in our opinions, top 5 bases in our opinions as well. And then also online, I believe on our website, we have some information about the different bases, kind of how base selection works. So what the odds of actually getting your base are, to help you kind of understand that better. Because a lot of people don't realize, like, they're like, well, I put these bases at the top of my list, but I didn't get them. And, if 90% of the Air Force is putting those at the top of their list and they can only take, a handful of people, then most people are not getting that pick. And so
I have a lot of people choosing Italy and then them hating it, and they got what they actually put down. Or
especially for security forces, like you said,
yeah,
security forces it's a nuke base.
obviously Italy is, yeah,
A little bit more higher stress than possibly some other locations. So it's like, yeah, I got Italy, but then the amount of work that goes into that on security forces end is a lot heavier than some other places. Yeah, that's a big thing to fully understand, is it's not just the base that makes the place, like it's also what you're going to do at that specific base.
I would say job number 1, base number 2.
So now what would your advice be for people that are currently in, whether they just joined, they're in their first year, they've been in for 5, 10, 15 years? What's your advice for those people?
To stick with it, stick throughout your contract, keep on doing what you're doing. You don't know what's going to happen when you're close to the end of your contract. There's been a lot of people that I know that have wanted to get out the first year, and then they're still in right now. So they've been in for 14 years plus, and now they're senior master sergeants or tech sergeants or what have you, and they're still in. I'm like, wow, they're actually still in. And they told me that they wanted to get out within the first year. Wherever you are right now doesn't mean that you're going to be there in the next 3 years. That would be my advice, is to stick it out. Do what you're supposed to do. Have an open mind as well. Think that nothing is concrete. You could always change after your first contract. You could always get out. You could always still stay in. It's ultimately your decision on what you want to do.
It's funny because I actually had just interviewed Hugo Escobar, which he did 21 years in the Air Force, and he signed a 4-year contract initially. And his mindset from the first year or two was, I'm getting out. So he pretty much said that his whole first 4 years in, ended up doing 16 years active duty, getting out, and then doing reserves until he retired. It was somebody that in his initial contract came in, I'm just going to get this to get on my feet, just do my time, get out, did a retirement. I joined 6 years, thought probably leaning towards doing a career, but I was still going to be open-minded about it. Lo and behold, after my 6-year contract, I decided not to stay in. So it's funny how that works, is a lot of the people that you think are going to stay in and they're all gung-ho from the first get-go, a lot of times they might not end up lasting and staying in. And then the people that are like, nah, I'm just using this as a stepping stone to life, I'm just going to get out. And then here they are, 15, 20 years later, and they're re-enlisting again until they hit retirement.
Yeah, just stick with it, and you never know what's going to happen after the first contract. Your mind is definitely going to be completely shifted. It all depends on where it goes, but just keep an open mind. What you think of when you first join or the first year is probably not going to be the same once that time comes up of when it's time to get out.
Well, if you sign a 4-year contract at 19 and you're getting out at 23, even in that short amount of time, your mindset grows a lot and you get a lot more exposure. And so it's like you're way more mature at 23 than you are at 19. It's kind of crazy to see how much, because it's hard at 19, right? If you join, you're like, I'm just doing my 4 years, I'm going to get out, or I'm going to do 20 years. You're still very young and naive at that point. I joined at 21, I was 22 in tech school. And even then I was still very naive and I had a lot of life to learn. And so throughout, my 6-year contract, my mindset and my growth was a lot. The way I felt when I was 21, 22 was not the way that I felt when I was 25, 26. And then what would your advice be for people that are on the tail end? They already know that they're getting out, they're starting that process, they're preparing themselves for what's next after the Air Force. What is your advice for those people, or even the people that maybe gotten out in the last few years and they're still trying to get a foot in the civilian world, because it is a shift, it is a difference between the military back to civilian. So what's your advice to those people?
My advice would be to get your body out there, to shake as many hands as you possibly can, because every every single person you meet is an opportunity, whether it be for a job, whether it be like just a friendship or what have you. You never know what it's going to lead to. For me, it was bowling. I went back to my first job was in a bowling alley, and I actually loved the sport. I loved everything about it. I had no idea that the people that are surrounded by me would actually influence what I'm actually doing now as a full-time career. Advice would be is to get out there, shake as many hands as you possibly can. You'll end up figuring it out with what you actually want to do and what your niche is, I would say, and what you feel comfortable in doing. I feel grateful that I've met so many people along the way. I know thousands of people now because of the bowling community through the Air Force. It makes things fall into place a little bit easier the more people that you meet.
So essentially, networking is your biggest advice.
Network, 100%. Yeah, it's a long-winded networking idea. Basically making sure that in person, online, whatever you got to do is just make sure that you put yourself in front of people.
And the best way to look at networking is as one person, you only have so many skills, you only have so much knowledge, you only have so many experiences, and you only know so many people.
Oh, that's the other thing too. I have no college background other than what the Air Force has taught me. I have 0 degree. I have a high school diploma, a couple college credits from the Air Force. That's it. I'm not a school guy. I don't like to go to school. I knew that going in. I knew that coming out. It's not for me. I needed to find my niche, basically interacting with people, finding my own way. Not to say that schooling is for everybody or not for everybody, but at the same time, school isn't the answer for everybody. Neither is sales, neither is interacting with people. So you just got to find your own way and just keep pursuing it. Make sure you network as much as possible.
Yeah. So with networking, right, like one brain is only, it doesn't matter if you have education, doesn't matter if you have all this job experience, whatever. One brain is still less powerful than 10 brains, than 100 brains, than 1,000 brains, right? And so when you only have so much experience, you only have so many people that you know, so many skills. When you have a network that you can tap into and you can access other people's brains and they're willing to share their network with you and their connections and their skills and their information and their job opportunities, most people are actually going to get a lot of their job opportunities through a network. Is either through a referral, somebody that they know that says, hey, my company is hiring, or I know somebody that's hiring. Having more brain power, your brain can only expand so much. It's the same thing with computers. Right now, computers are only so strong individually, but if you hook up 1,000 computers together, it becomes a supercomputer, right? And so it's the same thing with our brains. Like networking is the same way. When you expand your network and who you know and who you interact with and meet as many people as possible with as many different backgrounds as possible, you're actually expanding your ability to be successful and have a higher output. That's something where, like, I love that you mentioned that, because that's also something that Hugo mentioned in the first episode of this podcast. And it's really something that, like, I am really passionate about as well. And I think it's really underestimated. But I think I'm going to see a trend with most of the veterans that I interview is networking is either what got them to where they are, or it greatly improved their life or made things easier when they transitioned out.
And what's funny is while you're doing it, you don't realize that you're doing it either. It's a fulfilling as well when you're actually meeting people. That's what I do right now for me in sales is all networking. We don't really have that many people coming in. I have to reach out and I have to contact people that I know want to buy a car. Or now that I just got my life insurance certificate, I can actually branch out and be like, hey, whoever needs life insurance, let me know. I'll be glad to help. So now is just an opportunity to branch out even further.
And then because you're diving into another career path, you're also going to meet people that have been maybe still in sales, but different type of sales. And so you're going to learn a lot more skills. You're going to meet a lot more different people through that. 5-10 years from now, you're going to look back and be like, wow, actually, because I've met all these different people, that's actually gotten me to where I am today, because different connections or information that they've shared with me. And so networking is cannot be underestimated how powerful it can be. All right. Do you have any other information that you would like to share at this point with others as far as your Air Force experience, or any advice or anything else that you can think of that we didn't cover in this podcast episode?
Yeah, make sure you're physically fit for the Air Force as well as mentally prepared, especially for the newcomers that are just coming in. I know I struggled with it when I was first in high school. I had to go to the recruiter every Tuesday and Thursday to work out with him. There's definitely resources that are out there, and also mentally to make sure that you know what you're getting into. Mental mindset is the biggest thing for the Air Force, is to making sure that you're able to get spoken to and without having an attitude, and making sure you're following orders. People are going to be in your face all the time your entire career. You just got to learn how to adjust to it. So that would be my advice, is basically have an open mind, but also make sure that you're mentally prepared and physically prepared.
And actually on airmanvision.com, I have BMT fitness prep guide that you can get as well. And then also have a BMT prep guide that helps kind of show you all of the things you need to know to excel at basic training. So we have the resources on our website in order for you to help prepare to succeed at basic training and beyond. But definitely being prepared for that initial step, because much like, for instance, an interview is your gateway to getting a job, the recruiter is your gateway to getting into the Air Force. And in order to get through the recruiter, you have to meet certain requirements, one being the fitness level. And then through basic training, you have to be mentally focused enough to be able to mentally get through basic training. Well, I appreciate your time jumping on this podcast episode, Frank. I know you're a busy guy because you're balancing 2 jobs essentially right now between car sales and life insurance sales. But I think everybody
I would
really
say 3
appreciated
or
you.
4 jobs, because I got the wife and the baby back home too. So
Yeah. So definitely a busy man. So, but it's good to hear that your experience, your 4 years in the Air Force, has offered you a lot of opportunities after, and has really shaped you who you are, and has helped you excel as a civilian after you got out.
Thank you, Kyle.